Hello, good afternoon. Do you hear me? At least Catherine and Karen, can you guys hear me?
Yep. Can you hear us?
I do hear you. There's a bit of an echo, but I do hear, at least Catherine, I heard you. Ken?
Yes. Hello, everybody.
Hey, wonderful. Loud and clear. Super. Welcome, everyone. I see that people are joining. Let's give it just another couple of minutes to ensure that everyone is connecting. I needed a couple of minutes to get myself connected. This is a new system for us. We're using generally Zoom, but due to the security measures that you all know, we've decided to use WebEx. I hear it's reliable, so I hope that all of you connecting to this webinar can hear us loud and clear. We have the team to support. The names you see there are Samuel Hill, Giuseppe Filizzi, and Rory Brown. If you guys have any issues, technical or otherwise, please drop them a note and they'll be happy to support you. So whilst we get ourselves slowly ready to launch the webinar, well, I welcome you all who are joining. Good morning, good afternoon to you, wherever you are. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us to discuss the circular economy and its relations to TIC sector. As you know, we're going through very difficult times, and if there is a learning to be taken here or a lesson to be had, is obviously linear economy and our consumption and mode of life as we've been going on for the last couple of decades is no longer viable, and this crisis is the crystallization of that issue. And I do hope that when business resumes back to normal, that we take the relevant lessons from this crisis so that we enhance and that we move on with the transition towards a more circular, just and fair economic model that takes into consideration the 3 Ps of sustainability: the people, the planet, and the profit. So I will let, obviously, our 2 experts and presenters, Catherine Sheehy, who's the Global Lead for Sustainability Partnership at UL. And Catherine has previously led the UL Environment and Sustainability Advisory Practices, helping the organizations operationalize their sustainability and circular economic commitments. Before that, Catherine was manager with Accenture, where she led organization design and change enablement teams. And she's accompanied by another colleague from UL, Ken Boyce, who's a corporate fellow at ULSCC and serves as Global Principal Engineer Director, Energy and Power Technologies. He currently leads the global technical operations for renewable energy technologies, batteries, energy storage systems, advanced grid technologies, smart city infrastructure, e-mobility systems, drones and autonomous vehicles, oil and gas and hydrogen fuel systems, power distribution, factory automation related equipments. So with this, obviously the 2 presenters we have a round and robust expertise about the topic at hand, and I'll leave you in a minute in their more than capable hands to hear from them and later on interact with them. I do encourage you to ask questions, and so that to get this a bit lively and interactive. So just a couple of practical info. Duration of the webinar is 45 minutes, 30-minute presentation and 15 minutes Q&A session. We have muted all participants and turned the cameras off just to allow for a better streaming. The question should be submitted through the platform via the chat function. Well, they will be addressed during the webinar Q&A and of course along the way so as to make sure that we do not leave any questions behind. We will be distributing the presentations and the recordings afterwards. We will also be sharing a survey with all the participants just to get your feedback on how you found the topic. And if there are any pending questions that you would like to be addressed, we'd be more than happy to take that on. If you want to learn more about the presenters, I invite you to connect with them through LinkedIn so that you can see more about their profiles, or simply go to the website of UL to find out more about them. And with that, I give the floor to Catherine and Ken. Thank you so much, guys, for taking the time to do this. Really appreciate it. So the floor is yours. Please, Catherine, take on the presentation. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? I see you nod. Thank you. Great. So, hello, I am Catherine. She, as Hanan said. I am grateful to you and all of the those of us who've joined us to discuss this topic, even during these uncertain times, as that tells me something about our collective commitment to helping create a vision of the better world for ourselves and for future generations, and our understanding that more circular economies are part of that vision. This is really important work, and I'm glad to be part of that, and I think it has relevance even during these times. I'm really honored to join in a conversation about the circular economy and second life products at the crossroads of circularity and sustainability with my colleague, Ken. Ken, as Hanan mentioned, is a Global Principal Engineer Director of UL's Energy and Power Technologies and a Corporate Fellow in UL, and lots of other wonderful credentials. So thanks for joining, Ken. Before I invite Ken to share his insights and knowledge about this issue and UL safety work and its relationship to the circular economy, I'd like to actually share a few words about UL and why we're here. So the pandemic we're all in is showing all of us that the risks inherent in our increasingly and complex world and the skepticism that arises amidst confusion. Even before this crisis, we saw that alongside this increasing complexity and associated risks, trust in companies, brands, products, institutions is uncertain. At the same time, companies and brands are trying to take the right steps to ensure safety, demonstrate security, enhance sustainability, all while meeting market needs and capturing value for their efforts. And to do that, they seek assistance because those right next steps are not always clear. UL's designed our services to help our customers navigate this complex terrain. These are a few of them, and we help organizations innovate safely, harness information ecosystems securely, and create more sustainable products, businesses, and experiences. Our more than 14,000 employees around the world are at the ready to engage in these in any number of ways. And our impact is really illustrated in part by the numbers on this page. So operating in 143 countries, reaching more than 2 billion customers annually, with marks appearing on more than 22 billion products globally. But at the center of it all, working for a safer world by promoting safe, secure, and sustainable living and working environments for people through the application of science. This is what drew us into the circular economy conversation in recent years. And we're engaged in that conversation in a number of different ways. Through standards, UL can help organizations link product improvements, such as incorporation of recycled content, or operational improvements, such as waste recovery, to broader circularity efforts. And our standard, ANSI, Canadian Standard UL 3600, standard for measuring and reporting circular economy aspects of products, sites, and organizations, is available and in the market today for certification. It's one among those. UL also contributes to cutting-edge research to enable circularity, and our contributions to an EU Horizon 2020 project will increase the recycling of post-consumer plastics and electronics waste. We also collaborate through others through our membership in the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's CE100 network, and we engage in co-projects that result in things like the white paper on mass balance accounting for advanced recycling that we were part of. And a link to that paper is at the end of the document, which you'll receive after the session. And finally, UL helps raise awareness and build support for a transition of the circular economy through its co-sponsorship of other papers, such as the Europe Policy Center think tank's project and paper on a digital roadmap for the circular economy, which we did alongside organizations such as Orgalim and companies like HP. What is the circular economy? I think many people on this call are familiar with this. We reference the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's work on this issue. It's really about decoupling or disconnecting natural resource extraction and use and the environmental impacts from that extraction and use from economic growth. So circular economy is about economic growth, and it's really based on these three principles: designing out waste and pollution, keeping products and materials in use for as long as possible, and regenerating natural systems. And I will say it's not a new concept. Many trace the conversation today back to philosophies and thought leadership around industrial ecology, biomimicry, and more. Why are companies looking at this, and businesses, governments, et cetera, all stakeholders? Well, we know, and I am sure too, many on the call are familiar with these things. Regulatory measures are rising. In the EU, the Green Deal policies, the recent Circular Economy Action Plan are evidence of this. In China, circularity commitments have been in place for many years. Most recently, China program targeting 20% recycled content in all new products in electronics, batteries, and automobiles by 2025, for example. In the US, where Ken and I are, state and municipal level sustainability commitments are rising, zero waste requirements, bans on single-use materials. Resource constraints, so companies, CEOs are actually pointing this out in supply chain resilience. And we know, certain materials. So for example, here on the slide, we reference concrete, which is generally abundant, but some of the source materials that go into it there's a local scarcity. And when you reflect on what's happening today, nearly 75% of US companies have seen supply chain disruptions as a result of the pandemic. All of this is actually connected to carbon. A recent study concluded that reusing aluminum, steel, and plastics in Nordic economies could reduce emissions by 96% for aluminum, 86% for steel, and 37% for plastics, compared to emissions when products use raw materials. So there's real benefits as well, and that leads to the opportunities, the financial incentives. According to Ellen MacArthur Foundation studies, circular opportunities globally are estimated to be as much as 700 billion annually just on material savings, let alone innovations around new products and services. Global issuance of green bonds rose to 600 billion in 2018, not just around circular economy, but around sustainability at large, although circular economy is a big piece of that. And then, of course, green public procurement initiatives are growing. Consumers are also demanding new models. Now, millennials are choosing to access products. Certainly, this was the case before the pandemic. I will note that some claim that the pandemic spells an end to certain models, the sharing economy one, but there are nuanced perspectives to bear in mind around innovations the crisis is actually inspiring, such as the sterilization agents that enable the reuse of filtering face masks needed by health professionals on the front lines today. So I am personally thinking that this time actually can help us see new opportunities that we would not have seen before. Now, the idea of the circular economy bends this conventional linear take, make, waste model that we're in today to create loops. And many of you may also be familiar with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation's butterfly diagram of a circular economy, which shows biological, technical flows of materials up and down and throughout at different levels. In this presentation, we'd like to focus our attention on a company view of circularity, which is illustrated in the graphic on the right. You can see this company, a manufacturer, supplementing or wholesale replacing extraction of raw material with byproducts derived from other companies at the bottom. The company may engage in recycling, that's in that outer loop, reuse, or even business models such as the sharing economy or product as service. Those are the little ears at the top. And may repair, repurpose, or remanufacture product. The company view helps us understand better the 5 circular business models identified by Accenture that companies can apply to implement circular economy principles that we discussed earlier. At the top, you see circular supply chains in which supplies, this is materials or energy, are used as inputs. They're replaced by renewable, recyclable, or biodegradable resources. And companies then engage in power purchase agreements, for example, are illustrating this particular model. The recovery and recycling model aims at reusing resources or energy from disposed products or byproducts. So the materials marketplaces, such as created by the U.S. Business Council for Sustainable Development, which actually operates outside of the States as well. That's an example of a byproduct synergy platform that enables this business model. Product life extension, in which companies extend the lifetime of a product through remanufacturing, repairing, upgrading, or remarking. Is another example. Sharing platform business model, which I've already talked about, based on the sharing of goods and assets. And in the product to service business model, customers use a product through a lease or pay for use arrangement. So for example, carpet tiles that are leased and replaced over time. We're focusing our conversation today on the product life extension business model. Now, as part of UL's journey in understanding how we contribute to the circular economy, we began with our customers in mind. So that customer view, that graphic that is on the page here on the right-hand side. And we started by mapping what we had in place today or already with this company view in mind. And as you can see, we have several standards that have been in the marketplace for some years already serving this vision. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we want to focus our attention on the product life extension business model. And key to that is remanufacturing and rebuilding. And why focus on that? So the idea of remanufacturing was pioneered more than 80 years ago. As I mentioned, the circularity concept that we're discussing, it's not new. According to the Argonne National Laboratory study, remanufactured products conserve about 400 trillion BTUs of energy annually, which is enough to power about 6 million passenger cars annually. Remanufacturing can also be a gateway to recycling when the product lifespan can no longer be extended through these means. And the remanufacturing process can create cleaner recycling streams because of better separation material. So the question is this the perfect solution to create a more circular economy? With that, I'd actually like to invite Ken to start sharing his perspective on the connection between the circular economy and safety. Ken's going to take us through some definitions of terms, how these concepts all relate to one another through these and other product life extension examples. So Ken?
Great, thank you so much, Catherine, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. As Catherine had mentioned, this is a really important aspect of our global economy going forward. We want to take a look now at how the remanufacturing process is actually being used, or these concepts are being applied in different domains. First of all, I'd like to emphasize that the terms rebuilt, remanufactured, and reconditioned are all used somewhat interchangeably to address the same essential concept of taking action to bring a product into an advanced state of functionality. These processes are really, really important because they reduce the need for new resources and energy, as Catherine had outlined. They reduce transportation and emissions in many cases, and they extend the life and leverage the value of existing products, systems, and assets. These outcomes are positive, and I would like that last idea that we see on the screen highlighted about requalification. It's really an essential part of this process. Depending on the type and the function of the product or system that is being remanufactured, the nature of this requalification can vary widely, but it is extremely important. Let's take a look at how UL has supported that process in different applications. Catherine, if you go to the next slide, thank you. So at UL, we've established rebuilt certification programs for 136 different categories of equipment, and that list is constantly expanding. They cover a wide range of different products and systems, from the energy and power domain to hazardous locations, which constitute explosive environments like oil rigs or refineries. to a wide range of other types of products. And thousands of these product categories are currently being remanufactured in the world today, from automotive to office furniture and equipment, transportation, construction, but certainly electrical equipment, medical devices, and compressors. Major corporations such as Caterpillar, GE, Ingersoll Rand, and others generate significant business actually through these remanufacturing programs associated with their equipment. This process that UL has developed to complement that market-facing activity really supports a science-based assessment of the ongoing safety of the rebuilt products, which is a key element of that requalification. This process supports both sustainability and sustainable approaches. Safety really must be addressed to have sustained success in the rebuilding of products such as electrical equipment, appliances, energy systems, medical equipment that have direct and consequential safety implications. The process that UL has developed and applies takes into account the type of equipment, the unique safety issues associated with that equipment, and the rebuilder's qualifications for addressing safety and quality through aspects such as maintaining a proper supply of replacement parts that are adequate and appropriate for the particular end application. The approach ensures introductions of rebuilt products actually conform to today's set of safety requirements and supports ongoing confidence in the market through that certification. Go to the next slide, please. Thank you. To really address this from a testing, inspection, and certification standpoint, UL has a longstanding position on field modification or rebuilt equipment. So the authorized use of the UL mark is the manufacturer's declaration that a product was manufactured in accordance with the applicable requirements and was in compliance with those requirements when it was shipped from the factory. When a product bearing a UL mark is modified or rebuilt after it leaves the factory where the UL mark was applied, UL simply does not know if the product continues to meet the applicable requirements unless the modification or rebuilding is specifically investigated by UL. And we have 3 different programs that can be used to address that. The rebuilt product certifications we've talked about already that cover a wide range of product types to specifically address the rebuilding process. And as part of that remanufacturing or rebuilding process, there is an integral indication within the product identification that it has been rebuilt, just to be clear and transparent to the marketplace. But it's also an important element of establishing confidence in the safety of that particular piece of rebuilt equipment. We also have a program for retrofit certifications. So those are products that are intended to be installed in the field to products that bear the UL mark and have been in use already. But the concept of the mating of this new retrofit product with the host product, the resultant safety of the product, and the installation process have all been addressed well. So that is another way that we can have confidence in the ongoing safety of installed equipment that's being updated with a certified retrofit kit. And the final approach is a field engineering or field evaluated product program where regulatory authorities, owners, or others may have questions about the safety of a piece of equipment that's being installed in a particular installation. And UL's field evaluation program does an investigation at the site generally of that particular piece of equipment to address the specific conditions of use, the installation in that particular location, and the application of the technology as it applies there. So in the Americas, the National Electrical Code is a very important document that's used by regulators to address safe installation and use of electrical equipment. It's actually not a truly global document, but it certainly has wide influences used in many countries, and is really an important part of addressing the safety of the electrical infrastructure. And there's been quite a bit of activity that actually has been conducted in the National Electrical Code requirements specifically addressing safety of reconditioned equipment. It's actually issued every 3 years on a regular schedule. The 2017 National Electrical Code actually first addressed rebuilt products by requiring that they be identified as rebuilt and to provide additional guidance for regulatory authorities in the appropriate steps to address approval and acceptance of the installation being used in the electrical infrastructure. In the 2020 edition, the most recent edition of the National Electrical Code, it was really enhanced in significant fashion regarding rebuilt products. These changes really start to advance the aspects of transparency and adequacy of the safety approval of the rebuilt products. And so the key here is that in the 2020 National Electrical Code, the original certification mark should be removed, and approval of the reconditioned equipment shall not be based solely on the equipment original listing. And that's really a measure of protection for the original equipment manufacturer's brand and really the original certifier's brand to make sure that those initial market introductions and certification activities are not over leveraged in terms of the rebuilding and reconditioning. There's also additional text that addresses the application of the definition for recondition, and there is this distinction where it's not required for equipment that is being done within a facility as part of a regular equipment maintenance program. So that's really an important concept. That's not considered to be rebuilding or reconditioning in the context of the NEC. And I think the concept of the original listing mark, including the mark of the certifying body, is not necessarily the entire equipment label, right? And so there may be electrical rating information or other information that should maintain its presence on the product despite the reconditioning, but certification mark needs to be removed. And that's really, again, to promote transparency about the safety of the equipment and making sure that there's the proper level of certification in addressing the safety of that reconditioned installation. There's also some additional work that's been conducted in the 2020 National Electrical Code to specifically address particular types of products. And it really takes a number of forms. One is there are explicit indications that certain types of products can be rebuilt, where there may be some question about that. But there are also specific requirements that recognize that some safety critical equipment really cannot be reliably rebuilt and still be counted upon to perform its safety functionality. So some examples of that are things like ground fault circuit interrupters, molded case circuit breakers, and similar devices that are specifically prohibited from being rebuilt. The concern really is that in breaching these products to accomplish a rebuilding or remanufacturing or reconditioning, the ability of the product to continue to perform its critical safety functionality is irrevocably indeterminate. And so the National Electrical Code specifically prohibits some products from being rebuilt. So that's another elevation of the treatment of safety of the electrical infrastructure that's being advanced in a number of countries, and really promoting an appropriate level of transparency and deliberation about the ongoing safety of that electrical equipment. We also have some other examples that we can look at are being pursued, applying some of these circular economy concepts. And so one really relevant example is extending the life of assets through this process called lifetime extension. And this is most relevant for very expensive, resource-intensive assets like wind turbines. For turbines, warranties can run anywhere from 2 to 10 years, with 5 years being the most common one. When turbines are performing well and they continue to go through their normal lifetime, there is intent from owners, financial interests, insurers, regulators, and others to really have a science-based process for extending the life in an agreeable manner for all. And so as we see more and more wind turbines, for example, reaching that typical lifespan of about 20 years and performing well, there's a need for being able to address this. And you can see that we're starting to see the first significant wave of wind turbine products, primarily in places like Germany and Denmark, really reaching the end of that initial lifetime. So this is immediately relevant for that renewable energy infrastructure. Do we tear down the turbine and replace it, or do we find a way to establish agreement that the lifetime can be extended? And that's really why UL focused on the development of UL 4134, which is a standard for addressing the specific considerations for a lifetime extension of wind turbine. These requirements take into account the external conditions and the specific use of each turbine, its operational characteristics, and the turbine performance information. And this actually generates a calculation to determine the remaining useful life and set the stage for appropriate physical inspections and risk analysis as the product continues to be used in excess of its initial expected lifetime. So we can see this is another important and relevant way to use a science-based disciplined approach to address safety and reliability of products past what was originally anticipated in their design deployment.
I jumped the gun. Go ahead.
That's okay. Thank you. Thank you so much, Catherine. You're doing great. So another relevant exercise is really around repurposing. And so this is a really interesting area that we've seen become increasingly relevant. Of course, all of us appreciate carbon mitigation of tailpipe emission through the global use of electric vehicles charged by clean energy is increasingly important. The number of electric vehicles globally continues to increase really on an exponential scale. IEA data shows that globally we exceeded 5 million electric vehicles, mostly in China, the highest per capita rate in Scandinavia, but it continues to really be a global phenomenon. And that rate will continue to grow globally, with noted global automakers committed to raising their electric vehicle penetration, or committing really fully to electrification like we've seen some automakers do. The expectations for electric vehicles on the road in 2030 globally range from 130 million to 250 million. And so as when we look at an electric vehicle, the most expensive, value and really resource intensive part of the electric vehicle is the battery. For some batteries, it is as much as half the price of the electric cost of producing an electric vehicle, although that price continues to be reduced globally. And the average life of an electric vehicle battery is about 5 years. It depends on the technology. It depends on how it's being charged and discharged, driven. Depends upon the environmental factors. But after that period of roughly 5 years, the electric vehicle battery may not perform as it's needed to for motive applications. And so if we take that exponential growth of electric vehicle deployment that's happening, and we project about a 5-year lag on that, we'll see an exponential growth of electric vehicle batteries becoming available in really significant numbers. So finding continual ways to support extension of electric vehicle battery resources really becomes increasingly relevant. Energy storage demands continued battery resources to unlock the power of renewables and to enable energy consumers. There's a great demand for rebuild or repurpose electric vehicle batteries in applications like powering 5G base stations. And there's also an incredible aspect of this that needs to be addressed in terms of global safety and equity. There's a lot of concern, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, where there's an incredible need both in urban and rural settings for increased energy storage, that there may be substandard products, perhaps, introduced into their marketplace and imperiling their population. And so making sure we collectively work together to develop processes to support safe extension and repurposing of electric vehicle battery resources is really important. That's what really drove UL to work on the standard UL 1974 and support a safe electrical infrastructure integrating these electric vehicle batteries. It really, again, is a science-based assessment of the health of the particular battery assets, whether it's the entire battery or the individual cells, and really supports an appropriate and flexible extension of safe repurposing of these.
Thanks, Ken. And you just touched on an equity issue. Love to hear a little bit more about that, because these circularity questions are not just about efficiency of material flows, it's about the impact on human lives. And you shared with me some thoughts about where you see this going next in light of, other issues that we've seen, dramatic weather events and the like. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, I mean, I think it is such an important issue, and really in terms of us acting collectively and deliberately to use science and advance that safety, both in terms of vulnerable populations, but also in terms of kind of responding to events, right? And we see opportunity certainly with the present pandemic situation to make sure that we're thinking equitably about how people are being treated, but also making sure that we have the most flexible and innovative processes for addressing a safe, circular approach to resources. And we're seeing, I think, as we think about the increasing number of severe weather events around the globe, the significant clustering of much of the world's population near coastlines, we're seeing kind of a new wave, so to speak, of water damage and other types of threats to the electrical infrastructure through hurricanes and tornadoes and similar types of weather events. And that really presents some significant challenges, right? Because again, when we have a large scale weather event that damages much of the electrical infrastructure, there's a very important question about, do I extend the life of the equipment? Do I replace it? Is there a safe way for me to make sure that I can continue to use this existing these existing systems? And so we've seen real significant rise on a global level of the right ways to deal with this. There's quite a bit of activity going on. And I think the really good news in my mind is that humans are endlessly resilient. And I'd just like to talk briefly about one case study. We all remember the horrible event, the Fukushima event in Japan, really kind of a perfect storm of unfortunate conditions that caused a very significant human and natural consequence. But as the Japanese people in the region faced power loss and rolling power disruption, that human innovation really sparked some new ideas. People started using their electric vehicles to power their homes and critical loads. And this was really the catalyst for the technology called V2X, a vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, which is offering really great new ideas for us to globally leverage the convergence of this transportation and infrastructure in really interesting ways, and using electric vehicle fleet batteries as a very flexible and dispatchable energy asset. And so I think as we see these types of things happen, and the opportunity to scale them to apply some of those circular concepts and make sure we co-manage that with safety, I think there's really some great opportunity. So I think maybe Catherine, you could tell us more about how some of these concepts are being advanced in the standards world.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this actually does queue up some questions that we've seen some of you submit through the Slido platform. But just as a reminder as well, please ask any questions in the chat box so that we can start queuing those up. We might have more than we can address in this session, and we'll seek to, address some of those outside of this if we run out of time. But, as Kim mentioned, as we look at these issues and how to address them, as the circularity kind of conversation unfolds, we're looking very closly at, well, what has already happened and how does that relate? What have we already been doing and how does that relate to this new conversation? Because as I've said, the circular economy is actually not a new concept. We're just having new conversations about it. And there are some innovative opportunities entailed. It's also about opening our eyes to those opportunities and then seeing things that we have been doing in new ways. And so our recycled content standard is a reflection of that. It's in its 5th edition. It's actually referenced in the UL 3600 circularity standard that I mentioned earlier. And it now includes procedures to validate the % of product that is refurbished. And this is how we start to link and connect across our portfolio and our family of services and the standards and certifications that we provide to be able to say something valuable in the marketplace or help our customers say something valuable in the marketplace about what they are doing. So as we start to move into the Q&A, I think we'd like to leave you with just a few thoughts. Now, the circularity and sustainability benefits of the things that Ken has mentioned, remanufacturing, other product life extension methods, are really clear. They're clear both in terms of the safety imperatives that drive us to look at these issues in this way, but they also are clear in terms of the efficient use of resources, and there are carbon, there's embedded other resource aspects to these products that can really benefit from looking at this issue, refurbishment, remanufacturing, extending the life of products much more carefully. And there are a lot of opportunities to extend these practices into a wider variety of built environment and consumer products. These are the next frontiers. Capturing the value in remanufacturing and product life extension adoption does require action on multiple fronts, all of which could benefit from the evidence-based research standards and verification services that those of us on this call provide to enable safe scaling. So there are regulatory drivers, adjustments to existing regulations or enactment of new regulations to allow movement of materials, potentially sometimes even across national boundaries, to enable the production and sale of remanufactured product, potential market incentives. There's collection and reverse logistics infrastructure. So the systems and the processes and the actual, built environment that can enable this. These systems are needed to enable the collection and end use of product in some cases. And safety standards and validation can enable that uptake. There's technological requirements, so that the technical or product knowledge of these practices is not universal, certainly not as well understood in some industries compared to others. And so education and learning, advisory support services can help grow industry knowledge, followed by development of standards and validation services for these new technologies, products, or product categories that might emerge. And the final piece is the market. Consumer attitudes to remanufacture 7-life products sometimes is different from what we've been talking about, and the expectations or willingness to pay can depress those opportunities for companies to engage in these practices. So this is where the science-based, evidence-based certification of evidence of like new, better than new, when used in the context of broader marketing campaign, which in collaboration with others can happen in the marketplace. These are things that are all enablers of the uptake of what we're talking about here. With that said, Ken, I'd love to invite you to say anything more in conclusion before we open up the floor to some questions.
I'd just like to thank everybody for expressing interest in this really important topic. And again, I think the challenge for us as a community of practice is to really co-manage, again, circularity and safety, because we need both. And so both of those things are relevant, and together we can do it.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to start with a couple of questions that some folks asked in Slido. I'm saying that right? One of those is, the 3R rule includes reduce, reuse, recycle. Most certification organizations, the questioner asked, said work for safety and reliability. And how do we keep that balance? I'll start, and Ken, I'd love to invite you to the conversation. We see safety and sustainability as linked, as Ken said. Today, many of the requirements are in separate standards, and that's appropriate because they're intended to solve different issues, and there are different drivers. So safety concerns are often mandatory for compliance with law at different levels of jurisdiction. Sustainability concepts are often voluntary. They operate under separate guidelines as well. So ISO 14021, 24, 40, 44, eco-labeling guidance. Certain sustainability requirements are increasingly becoming encoded in law. And I think as that evolves, we might see these standards evolve in different ways, potentially through normative references to one another, in some cases through formal integration of the concepts, but they do require, different kind of testing, in some cases, different skill sets and there are different requirements for what's produced at the end in terms of market-facing claims. Be curious, Ken, what your perspective on that is.
Yeah, I think again, as you've said, Catherine, really being mindful of both of those things and having increased discussions like this one about how those aspects play out are going to be increasingly important for all of us. I think it gives us a chance to scrap out some of those perhaps inherent conflicts, right? We have seen, for example, with battery recycling, that there are design principles that really make that battery recycling process much more difficult or unsafe. And so having the discussion around those different aspects and really actively catalyzing deliberations to make sure that we're talking to each other is really, really critical. And I think there is an underlying level of research and safety in many cases that really would support continued movement forward to really harmonize different approaches as much as we can.
Yeah. Now, before I'm going to interject a question I have actually in the conversation, we talked about the balance of innovation and the rigor of standards development. And sometimes you hear about a perceived tension between the speed of innovation and the duration of a standards development process. I think many on this call may have been involved in standards development that has taken a long time. What would you say to that?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting question, I think, in the sense that we do see this increasing speed of market developments and deployments, and consensus standards are very powerful documents because they're consensus, right? We've taken the time to really interject all those thoughts and balance them. But I do think one exemplar that is worthy of consideration is the hoverboard scenario that happened several years ago. We saw a really difficult global situation unplaying as these products were very rapidly developed and deployed. And we saw safety considerations really being demonstrated in an inferior way in a lot of places. There were fires all around the globe. And so it really was a very difficult situation. I'll just say we saw that as a real opportunity to say, let's leverage the scientific work, the research and development programs that have been in place. We developed a standard actually in a matter of weeks. It was leveraged by national regulatory authorities really changed the game, and we had a certification of a number of certifications to that new standard that was developed in a matter of weeks within a few months. And so I think this idea of saying, 3 to 5 years for standard, we need to raise our expectations and come together and be able to act more nimbly to address those critical safety concerns. It's really possible. And I think we have the tools and the technology, certainly the insights to do it if we work together and apply ourselves.
Exactly. At the same time, that science-based approach to evaluating UL 1974 took a little bit longer. Can you talk a little bit more about what, why was it important to take that time? What were some of the lessons learned, I guess, from that experience, and how we can take that into our thinking about the next safety certification related to advanced circularity that we might consider?
Right, UL 1974, it's really an interesting challenge, right? Because we're trying to extend the life of these electric vehicle batteries, but obviously that prohibits any sort of destructive processes, right, in terms of assessment. So we have to have non-destructive assessments of the true safety, the state of health of the individual batteries. We have this new, emerging group of companies that really accomplish that repurposing. The automakers are doing pilots, but I think in general they probably are more interested in divesting themselves of the asset into this new group of repurposers. And so some of them actually only act on entire electric vehicle batteries. Some of them go down to the cell level. Electric vehicle batteries vary widely, right? We have the Tesla that has hundreds of 18650 cells, and then we have other vehicle batteries that have 6 cells that are much larger. And so being able to accommodate all of those variations with a non-destructive test protocol or assessment protocol, and then being able to really establish the confidence of the safety of the asset as we go forward was challenging. There's no way around it. But I'm really happy with the way the standards community came together, worked with UL. We had the automakers, the repurposers, the users, scientific experts from academic institutions and research institutions, really all working together. And I think we've gotten a really, really good outcome that will be very positive for the globe.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to go back to some questions we got from Slido, and then just remind everybody you can ask questions in the Q&A or the chat box. I'll get to one of those in just a moment. But one person wrote, circular economies have been practiced differently in the world. Is it necessary to set up recognition mechanisms of circular economy standards / certification among TIC members? And I'll start and invite you, Ken, to comment on this. Clearly economic models are also different worldwide, and circular economy is about circular economy. Circularity is also a really broad domain, and we've actually just touched on one sliver of one piece of that whole conversation. There are, though, a lot of efforts underway to create frameworks and guidelines on the issue broadly. So there is an ISO document being discussed, ISO TC 323, Circular Economy Management Systems. And UL is participating in the US committee discussions on that. There are also a number of standards addressing components of circularity, waste diversion, recycled content, et cetera. And so normative references and mutual recognition across some of these tools where they're useful for business, I think, can be helpful. And certainly whenever we are in the process of developing standards, we look out there to see what exists and what's credible standards that exist in the marketplace. I think the challenge and opportunity for our community is not only in identifying those right standards and harmonization across procedures, but actually looking at how do we work with others in the space to help advance the enabling environment for more circular economies. And so going back to our concluding thoughts, informing policy development, infrastructure, technical knowledge, and education broadly. Any thoughts, Ken, on that question?
Yeah, I certainly agree with what you said, Catherine. Maybe I'll just reiterate something I touched on in the presentation, and that is, when you do have safety as a relevant consideration for products that are being rebuilt or remanufactured or addressed in this fashion, I think it really is important to be transparent and be clear about what's being done. And we do see standards and conformity assessment as really playing a very relevant role in that confidence on a global market level. So some processes will have little or no safety implications, and that's acceptable too. Certainly in terms of the way we approach it then. So there's no one solution that works in every case, but it is important, I think, to leverage standards as a really important way to establish that kind of collective view on risks that we will accept and those will mitigate. And then really having conformity assessment, building confidence around the real world adherence to those principles and the standards. So I think that is a relevant consideration for us, and that may take different forms in different geographies.
Got it. There now are a couple more questions that came in. I'm looking at time, and I know we won't be able to get to all of them. One question or one thesis is that the current and possibly long-term oil prices will increase barrier to market entry of circular and second life products. And how do we evaluate this? Yeah, I think there are certainly sort of meta level economic trends that influence business decisions at different points in time that amplify or depress some of the things that we're talking about. At the same time, the companies that we're working with see the next not so much existential anymore threat on the horizon related to climate change, the issues around resource scarcity, and they're not ignoring it. We're seeing companies increasingly ask for guidance and implementation steps when they're ready to get back into full production to address these issues, notwithstanding some of those other trends. I would like to, thank everyone for joining us and just share a couple of final pieces of information for you that you can reference after when you get access to the materials. There's lots of information. These are just a few examples of some of the circularity related content that UL has produced. We also know that we're in this very challenging time. And I think like a lot of you on this call, UL is constantly looking at how do we respond to the crisis at hand? How do we protect our people, our customers, everyone, as we continue to help businesses bring safer, more sustainable, more secure products to the marketplace. The main link here, the UL COVID-19 support and services, is where you'll find the latest information from our organization and our leadership. I've provided a few links that I think are relevant to everybody, and this will continue to be updated and evolve as our understanding at this time evolves. So thank you so much, Ken.
My pleasure, Catherine. It's always a very enjoyable time talking with you about these really important topics. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us and being part of the discussion. And I think together we'll make a difference in advancing circularity and safety.
Agreed. And thank you to the TIC Council. I'll turn it back to you to close us out.
Thank you so much, Catherine and Ken, for this very informative session. Really appreciate you sharing with us the services and the information that you guys have to develop the services around circularity and recommendations to companies. So with that in mind, I'd like to thank the participants that have taken the time to join us. There are a couple of questions that I've seen on Slido which are not necessarily related to the topic, specifically one related to upcoming methods of inspection using drones, etc. We do have committees that are looking into that, and that's a different topic altogether, so we'll be happy to address that separately. For the rest, we'll be sending, as I said, a survey to get your input about how you took this information shared today, whether you found this useful, what else we can do to potentially provide more information. As Catherine said, this is just a really small fraction of the topic. Circular economy is so wide and varied that we'll be looking at organizing other webinars, potentially with other members, to shed light on other aspects of the topic. So therefore, we'll be delighted to get your comments and input. With that, I thank you all very much, and above all, thank the two presenters, Catherine and Ken, for your efforts into sharing this hour with us and the participant. Keep watching the space, because there are other topics coming up, namely on cybersecurity and trade in the current COVID-19 situation. This is likely to happen in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and we'd be delighted to have you again joining us. Thank you very much all. Wish you to stay safe and healthy wherever you are, and wish you a lovely rest of the week. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Thank you.